Yeah, like that, like, but no tears coming.
2 days before his death, YNW Sack Chaser was allegedly involved in a physical altercation that left YNW Melly missing a gold tooth. Years later, the same driver who transported the bodies, YNW Bortland, would accept a plea deal after years of silence. For a long time, he never folded publicly. This part begins unpacking the deaths, the betrayals, the alleged confessions, and the industry ties quietly circling the case long before the public caught on. At the center of it all stands one figure many insiders considered the true architect of the YNW movement: Anthony Williams, known to the world as YNW Sack Chaser. Born in 1997, he was the oldest of the core YNW members. And from the beginning, he carried himself like someone who understood the business side of music just as much as the spotlight. He wasn't simply another rapper trying to break through. He positioned himself as a co-founder, a self-described originator of YNW, and the person handling the behind-the-scenes work that most artists avoid. Every successful rap collective usually has one individual keeping the structure intact, managing momentum and pushing decisions forward. That role, according to those close to the movement, belonged to Sack Chaser. He handled promotion, organization, and the business mechanics that helped elevate the brand. But as the movement grew, so did internal pressure. And this is where the story begins to darken. Court documents later revealed that prosecutors did not portray Sack Chaser as a purely positive force. Instead, they alleged an aggressive management style that crossed lines. According to the state, text messages showed him demanding cuts of Melly's earnings and asserting control over money and direction. Those messages, entered into evidence during the trial, suggested mounting tension rather than unity. The tone shifted from partnership to confrontation, and the divide became increasingly visible. One text message from August 2018, just 2 months before the shooting, stood out in particular. In it, Sack Chaser warned Melly, saying, "Before I let something happen to me or play with my family, everybody will die." That message did not read like casual talk between close friends. It suggested fear, dominance, and a belief that the situation was already slipping toward something irreversible. Then came the incident that pushed everything into sharper focus. Just 2 days before the killings, Sack Chaser allegedly knocked out Melly's gold tooth during a fight. According to testimony from Juvie's father, the altercation was witnessed by Melly's girlfriend. The timing matters. 2 days, not months, not years. A violent clash between two people deeply tied to one another, immediately followed by a double homicide that would later put one of them at the center of a capital murder case. On October 26, 2018, everything reached its breaking point. After leaving a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale, Sack Chaser and Juvie were rushed to Memorial Regional Hospital in Miramar, Florida. They arrived around 4:35 a.m., driven there by Bortland. Both men had suffered multiple gunshot wounds. Sack Chaser had been shot 8 times, 4 times in the head, 3 times in the back, and once in the arm. The severity alone told a story of intent, not chaos. At first, the explanation was simple and familiar. The narrative claimed they had been victims of a drive-by shooting. Melly himself reinforced that story publicly, posting tributes on Instagram the very next day and writing that jealousy had taken his brothers from him. At the time, many accepted that version without hesitation. But the physical evidence would not cooperate.
So this resting angle in the seat, you have the projectile coming in, exiting through the top of the skull.
Ballistic analysis conducted by Detective Christopher Williams, a specialist with decades of experience and more than 50 analyses per year, contradicted the drive-by claim entirely. His conclusion was direct. The shots were fired from inside the vehicle, not from another car. With that determination, the original story collapsed. The idea of an external shooter no longer fit the evidence, and the focus shifted inward. Today, Sack Chaser's name exists in 2 spaces at once. In music, where his contributions helped shape the early YNW sound and structure, and in court, where his estate filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Melly. The suit seeks damages tied not just to loss of life, but to the value of the YNW brand itself. During the trial, Sack Chaser's mother, Jana, delivered emotional testimony, reminding the courtroom that beneath the labels, contracts, And accusations? Her son was still just a boy, chasing lights, not shadows. Known as YNW Juvie, was widely seen as the loyal soldier of the YNW movement. He was the youngest of the original core, but age never defined his role. Born on November 20th, 1998, in Gifford, Florida, Juvie grew up in the same tight-knit, economically strained environment that produced the entire YNW collective. This was a place where options were scarce, where survival often overshadowed long-term planning, and where music became more than expression. It became escape. In that environment, Juvie wasn't hanging on the edges. He was deeply embedded. He was a co-founder, one of the original voices shaping the YNW sound from the ground up. The streets influenced the music, and the music reflected the streets right back. Tracks like Tissue and collaborations such as Gins with YNW Melly carried a raw, unpolished energy that helped put South Florida on the map. His verses weren't flashy, they were direct. They carried hunger, urgency, and belief in something bigger. When he said, "We them gins, we gon' make it out the mud," it wasn't branding.
That's an easy way to snitch. And his lawyer gonna do that. A lawyer gotta do that.
It was a statement of intent. What deepens the tragedy is how closely intertwined his family was with everything that followed. Jay Green, another former YNW affiliate who would later surface in the case, was Juvie's cousin. That connection meant the fallout wasn't confined to music contracts or friendships, cut directly through bloodlines. When the violence happened, it wasn't just a promising artist lost. It was families fractured from the inside, forced to process grief alongside suspicion. On the night of October 2018, Juvie was found with multiple gunshot wounds. 4 to the back, 1 to the head, 1 to the arm. According to the prosecution, he may have been asleep in the rear passenger seat of the Jeep Compass when he was shot. That detail matters. It reframes the scene not as chaos, but as control. The forensic testimony supported that view. Bullet trajectories and blood spatter patterns pointed to shots fired from inside the vehicle, delivered at close range. The defense struggled to offer an explanation that fit the physical evidence. In the aftermath, Juvie's father, Christopher Thomas Sr., became one of the most outspoken voices, demanding accountability. In 2021, he filed a wrongful death lawsuit, alleging the killings were driven by greed tied to a proposed $5 million global branding deal for YNW apparel and licensing. According to the claim, Juvie stood to earn roughly $100,000 from that deal. To his father, the motive wasn't abstract. It was financial, calculated, and avoidable.
What the f I look like taking the deal that hurt my... What the f I look like giving a f about how y'all feel? I'm a young fly, be back to raising hell, prevent.
One detail continues to weigh heavily on him. Despite being invited, Melly allegedly did not attend either funeral. For Christopher Sr., that absence wasn't coincidence, it was a signal. Something that, in his eyes, aligned too closely with everything prosecutors were already suggesting. Years later, Juvie's music still moves. Songs like Tissue continue to rack up millions of streams across platforms. Fans revisit his work not just for nostalgia, but because the lyrics now carry added weight. When he sang, "Wipe your tears, we gon' make it," the line sounded hopeful at the time. Now it lands differently. He never lived long enough to see those dreams take shape.
He had just came off tour. Yeah, I'm surprised, man. I don't have no explanation, you know what I'm saying?
Juvie was only 19 years old when he died, barely past high school age, barely beginning to understand what life could become. His family has now waited more than 6 years for closure. That closure still hasn't arrived. And that brings the story to the man who drove that night. YNW Bortland, real name Cortland Malik Henry. Recently, no name has sparked more conversation online. Once facing the possibility of 3 life sentences, he ultimately walked out of court after taking a plea deal. The contrast between what he faced and what he received hasn't gone unnoticed, and the streets have been watching closely. Born on January 24, 1999, in Gifford, Florida, YNW Bortland grew up in the same environment that shaped the rest of the YNW circle. It was the same streets, the same pressure, the same limited paths forward. His musical influences reflected that reality. Southern rap icons like Future, Lil Wayne, Boosie, Gucci Mane, Young Scooter, and others shaped his sound and mindset. He wasn't positioned as the face of the movement the way Melly was, but he played a critical role inside the operation. Bortland was active, visible, and consistent.
Less than 1,000.
Ah, yeah.
How the hell did you make it out from there to, buzzing rap superstar now?
I went to school, like, just being in school, like, people just know me, like.
Releasing tracks like Came From and Been Through, which together accumulated more than 2.9 million YouTube views while he was already on house arrest. Even under legal pressure, he was still building momentum. That momentum came to a halt on the night of October 2018. Bortland was driving the Jeep Compass when the shooting occurred. Afterward, he transported Sack Chaser and Juvie to the hospital, telling authorities they had been victims of a drive-by shooting. That account would later come under intense scrutiny. Prosecutors alleged that instead of immediately seeking help, Bortland drove around with the bodies inside the vehicle for roughly 45 minutes. According to the state, that delay was not accidental. It allegedly gave Melly time to fire additional shots into the Jeep from outside, creating the appearance of an external attack and reinforcing the drive-by narrative. For years, Bortland stood firm beside Melly. Publicly and legally, the two appeared locked in solidarity. Bortland consistently maintained his innocence, echoing the same version of events. At one point, he even released a freestyle from jail, dismissing the accusations and projecting confidence. At the time, it sounded defiant. In hindsight, it would age poorly. On September 9, 2025, just one day before his trial was scheduled to begin, everything changed. Bortland accepted a plea deal. He entered a no-contest plea to accessory after the fact to first-degree murder and conspiracy to tamper with a witness. The agreement carried a 10-year prison sentence with credit for time already served, followed by 6 years of probation. The shift was immediate and impossible to ignore. Online reaction exploded. Some saw it as a calculated move, a way to avoid the risk of life in prison. Others labeled it betrayal, calling it outright snitching regardless of the legal language used. His attorney Fred Haddad moved quickly to shut that down, stating publicly, "I don't represent snitches. Cortland Henry is not a snitch. He will not be cooperating or testifying in Melly's trial." That statement was firm, but the details of the deal told a more complicated story. As part of the agreement, Bortland consented to a proffer. That process requires a defendant to provide truthful information to prosecutors about the case. While it does not automatically guarantee courtroom testimony, it does place cooperation into the official record. The distinction matters legally, but in the court of public opinion, it changed how his role was viewed. As of December 2025, Bortland remains incarcerated at the South Florida Reception Center in Miami-Dade County. His projected release date is January 2032. The man who once drove the night of the killings is now serving time tied directly to how that night unfolded. Then there is the YNW member who didn't make it to that car at all. The one who saw the signs early and stepped away, Jay Green. Born Yolan Armand Green on January 25, 1999 in Fellsmere, Florida. Jay Green was there from the beginning. He wasn't a fringe associate, was a co-founder of the YNW Collective in 2016, alongside Melly, Sack Chaser, and his cousin Juvie. That family connection makes his decisions harder to ignore. Juvie wasn't just a close friend. He was blood. In later interviews, Jay Green spoke openly about where he came from, describing just how small and limited Fellsmere really was. His music reflected that background. While his catalog never reached Melly's commercial heights, it showed clear potential. Tracks like Rugged surpassed 15 million streams on Spotify. His 2018 EP Waiting to Exhale highlighted his ability to mix emotional depth with gritty production. Features tied to YNW helped amplify his presence, but his trajectory ultimately moved in a different direction. Unlike others, Jay Green made a choice to distance himself before everything collapsed. In a story filled with loyalty, silence, and delayed consequences, that decision stands out. By 2017, Melly's breakout tracks like Youngins were already pulling in more than 10 million plays on SoundCloud, signaling that the movement was gaining real traction. But what ultimately separates Jay Green from the rest of the original YNW Circle ISNT numbers or visibility, it's timing. He recognized when the internal dynamics were shifting in a dangerous direction and made a decision most people don't make until it's too late. According to multiple reports, Jay Green stepped away from the collective sometime between 2018 and 2019. The reason was NT business alone. He cited personal fallout, pointing to growing issues with pride and ego inside the group that he believed were pulling things off course. When Melly and Bortland were later charged with the murders, Jay Green didn't dodge the subject. He addressed it directly, without theatrics, acknowledging the shock while keeping emotional distance. That restraint became part of his public identity. He didn't insert himself into narratives he didn't belong to, and he didn't attempt to rewrite history either. His name did resurface during trial preparation in 2024, appearing in text messages exchanged between gang members. Those messages referenced him alongside well-known artists like Young Thug and French Montana. The context mattered. Prosecutors were clear that these were industry-related mentions, not allegations. There was no claim of wrongdoing, no implication of involvement, and no evidence tying Jay Green to the murders in any capacity. The clarification was important, especially in a case where association alone had become enough to spark speculation. Today, Jay Green operates independently under 510 Music Group, the label he founded in 2020. He has released projects like the 510 mixtape and continues to work consistently, balancing creativity with the weight of surviving a collective that no longer exists. In recent YouTube reflections, he has spoken about what it means to be the last remaining member of the original YNW lineup. Not as a badge of honor, but as a reality he has to carry forward. What gives his story added gravity is the loss that sits underneath it. Juvie wasn't just a collaborator, he was his cousin. It meant grieving publicly while processing privately, all while rumors continued to circulate around anyone connected to YNW despite that. Jay Green has never been charged, named, or implicated in any criminal activity related to the case. His focus has remained steady: music, independence, and forward motion. Then there's the youngest name tied to this story, the one still growing up under its shadow: YNW Slime. Whenever the Melly case is discussed, one figure consistently appears standing firm in support. Melly's younger brother, YNW Slime, born Jemel Demons Jr. on April 10, 2007, in Gifford, Florida. Now 18 years old, he's been navigating a reality few teenagers ever face, trying to build a music career while your older brother sits in jail, facing the possibility of the death penalty. B-Slime was raised by their single mother, Jamie Demons King, in the same environment that shaped Melly. His introduction to music came early. He began recording at just 11 years old, inspired directly by his brother's rise. It didn't take long for people to notice. His debut freestyle at New Era Recording Studio in Miami gained traction quickly. And tracks like Baby Slime Freestyle have since surpassed 10 million views on YouTube. But his most impactful release came during the most painful moment for the family. In August 2019, shortly after Melly's arrest, B-Slime released Free Melly YNW Melly Tribute. The song wasn't subtle. It was a plea, public statement of loyalty and belief in his brother, at a time when public opinion was hardening. The release significantly boosted visibility for both siblings during one of the darkest chapters of their lives. What matters, especially in a case defined by proximity and assumption, is clarity. There is no evidence, no charge, and no allegation linking B-Slime to any criminal activity connected to the murders. His role in this story exists entirely on the outside of the crime itself. He remains a younger brother, trying to grow, create, and survive under a name that carries more weight than most people ever experience. He was only 11 years old when the murders occurred, and at the time, he was in Gifford, nowhere near the scene. His connection to the case has always been familial and emotional, not physical or criminal. Yet that distinction hasn't fully protected him from the reach of the prosecution. B-Slim's tribute music has appeared on the state's evidence list, flagged as material that could potentially be used to argue broader YNW ties to alleged gang activity. The implication alone raises uncomfortable questions. A child creating music in support of his incarcerated brother could see those same songs introduced in a death penalty case as contextual evidence. Despite that pressure, B-Slime has remained visible and consistent in his support. Throughout the 2023 trial proceedings, he shared updates on social media and appeared on Instagram Live as the case unfolded in real time. Alongside their mother, Jamie Demons King, he has been one of the most vocal advocates for Melly's innocence. Together, they have carried the weight of the Free Melly narrative while the legal system continues to stall and delay the retrial. While the case drags on, B-Slime's career has continued to move forward. He has collaborated with artists like Trippie Redd and appeared on Melly's 2024 album, Young New Wave, most notably on the track 772 Love Part 3, a title that deliberately pays homage to their Treasure Coast roots through the 772 area code. Financially, his net worth is estimated between $100,000 and $200,000. It's built through streaming revenue, live performances, and YouTube monetization. For someone just entering adulthood, the balance between opportunity and burden is unusually heavy. At 18 years old, B-Slam faces a challenge few artists encounter so early. Every interview, every headline, every analysis tied to YNW Melly inevitably circles back to him. He has had to mature quickly, navigating public scrutiny, family trauma, and the unforgiving structure of the music industry at the same time. As Melly's retrial continues to be pushed back, now projected for 2027, Slime remains the visible holder of the family name. His slime green chain still appears in his videos, a symbol of loyalty and continuity, a reminder that whatever unfolds inside a courtroom, blood ties don't disappear. But to fully understand the weight of this case, it helps to step back. So the YNW situation doesn't exist in isolation. It fits into a broader pattern unfolding across hip-hop, particularly when placed alongside the YSL Rico case, centered around Young Thug in Atlanta. Both cases involve rap collectives that prosecutors argue were not just music groups, but criminal street gangs operating behind artistic branding. In both lyrics and music videos have been introduced as evidence, a practice that has sparked national debate and criticism. Opponents argue it unfairly targets black artists, blurring the line between performance and confession, while supporters claim it reveals intent and association. In the YSL case, prosecutors allege that Young Stoner Life Records was actually Young Slime Life, a blood-affiliated gang tied to shootings, robberies, and murders. The trial became the longest in Georgia history, stretching over a year before concluding in October 2024. Young Thug ultimately pleaded guilty to gang participation charges and received time served along with probation. The outcome reshaped how many viewed the use of rap culture in courtrooms. That framework matters when examining YNW Melly's case. During the 2023 proceedings, Detective Danny Polo testified as a gang expert. His testimony focused on Melly's alleged affiliations, including supposed rivalries with Atlanta crews. Polo introduced footage from a 2018 altercation at Atlantic Records Studios in Atlanta, where YNW's group was shown clashing with members of NBA YoungBoy's entourage. The state's aim was clear: to establish patterns, associations, and an environment that prosecutors believe supports their broader theory. Whether those parallels hold up under scrutiny remains one of the most consequential questions surrounding the case. What's clear is that the YNW story has become part of a larger legal and cultural battle, one where music, identity, and criminal law are increasingly intertwined. That incident at the Atlanta studio took place roughly 2 months before the murders, and according to prosecutors, it marked a clear escalation in tension that could not be ignored. The state framed it as more than just a scuffle. In their view, it was a pressure point, one of several moments that helped establish motive and mindset leading up to October 2018. During testimony, Detective Danny Polo explained that his role went far beyond surface-level observation. Because of threats tied to the case, he testified remotely while analyzing hundreds of images recovered from Melly's phone. Those images, according to Polo, showed repeated use of G-Shine blood indicators. He pointed to messaging patterns where letters were deliberately substituted, replacing C with B or K, a practice gang experts often interpret as anti-Crip sentiment. To the prosecution, these weren't random stylistic choices. They were framed as coded language, signaling affiliation and hostility, part of a broader narrative the state was building around group identity and intent. Polo also revealed text communications between Melly and high-profile artists, including Young Thug, French Montana, and Joel Santana. The state used those messages not to allege crimes involving those artists, but to demonstrate how tightly interconnected these rap scenes were. In their argument, these weren't isolated figures operating independently. They were part of overlapping social and cultural circles where music, image, and street identity blended together. That context fed directly into one of the most controversial elements of the trial: the use of music as evidence. In Melly's case, prosecutors sought to introduce 55 songs featuring violent lyrics including 18 audio files and 14 videos. Their argument was that the content reflected gang activity, intent, and consciousness of guilt. No song drew more attention than Murder on My Mind. Its graphic storytelling became Exhibit A for critics who claimed Melly had essentially self-incriminated through his art. The debate was not new, but this case intensified it. In Young Thug's trial, a judge allowed 17 lyrics to be admitted into evidence, ruling that they demonstrated state of mind rather than violating First Amendment protections. Defense attorneys pushed back hard, calling the practice discriminatory and racially biased against rap music in particular. The backlash was immediate. Protect Black Art petition gained more than 280,000 signatures, turning the courtroom debate into a national conversation. That pressure led to tangible change in some states. California passed legislation limiting the use of rap lyrics as evidence unless they are directly relevant and probative. New York followed with similar protections. Florida did not. In Florida, where Melly faces trial, no such safeguards exist. The legal environment remains far less restrictive, giving prosecutors broader discretion in how artistic material can be presented to a jury. The overlap between these cases goes deeper than lyrics. Shared legal strategies, overlapping social circles, and identical gang designations used as aggravating factors all point to a wider shift in how prosecutors approach hip-hop cases. Whether one views these artists as victims of a system that fails to understand culture, or as individuals facing consequences for the worlds they chose to operate in, one thing is clear. The outcomes of these trials will shape how the justice system treats rappers for decades. That broader Florida context brings another name into focus: Kodak Black. It's difficult to tell the YNW story without acknowledging Kodak Black, a figure synonymous with Florida rap solidarity and the complex bonds that exist between artists in the state. Born Deuce and Octave on June 11, 1997, in Pompano Beach, Florida, Kodak's rise followed many of the same patterns seen in the YNW circle. Poverty, street exposure, legal trouble, and undeniable talent all collided early in his life. He emerged from the Golden Acres public housing projects to become one of the most streamed artists in hip-hop, but the ascent came with constant turbulence. Kodak's relevance to the YNW case lies in his consistent public support for Melly. Throughout the legal proceedings, he stood by him openly. In 2021, the two collaborated on Thugged Out, a track sampling trick, Daddy's I'm a Thug. The song featured Kodak rapping lines like "Free Melly, I'm in the same old boat," directly aligning his own legal struggles with Melly's situation. It wasn't subtle. It was a statement of shared experience. Melly recorded his verses from jail. The video, directed by Drew Filmed, juxtaposed luxury imagery with robbery scenes, blending aspiration and danger in a way that mirrored both artists' realities. After release, both Kodak and Melly publicly expressed dissatisfaction with the final mix, an unusual move that revealed the raw, unpolished nature of their collaboration. It wasn't a manufactured industry moment. It was personal. Kodak's own legal battles only reinforced the parallels. His history with the justice system has made him a symbol of both survival and scrutiny within Florida rap. That shared tension between success and consequence is what binds his story to Melly's more than any single song ever could. Federal firearms charges in 2019 led to Kodak Black receiving a 46-month prison sentence, a term that ultimately ended early after a presidential pardon in January 2021. The pardon, granted during the final days of the Trump administration, cited Kodak's participation in literacy programs while incarcerated. That decision immediately ignited debate. Questions surfaced about who is afforded second chances, who qualifies for redemption, and who remains behind bars without relief. In the context of Florida rap, the moment carried added weight. It wasn't just about one artist, highlighted how uneven outcomes can be when talent, visibility, and politics intersect. The connection between Kodak and Melly extended well beyond studio collaborations. In 2019, Kodak shared a jailhouse photo of Melly alongside his cousin Lil Sodi, captioned, "Free Q, Law, Lil Sodi." In That Thing with Melvin, it was a small moment, but one that underscored how tightly woven the Florida rap scene is. These artists didn't just share stages and charts, they often found themselves navigating the same legal corridors, facing similar scrutiny from the system. Detective Danny Polo's testimony during Melly's trial touched on that broader landscape. Polo discussed the structure and presence of blood-affiliated sets across Broward County, including areas like Pompano Beach and the neighborhoods where YNW operated. While Kodak himself was not implicated in the case, the testimony emphasized how interconnected these communities are, and how prosecutors often view those connections through a gang framework. In the state's narrative, proximity, association, and shared culture can become circumstantial threads. What complicates that narrative is the evolution of Kodak's public image. By July 2025, Pompano Beach officials presented him with the key to the city, praising his philanthropy. Donations of air conditioning units to heat-stricken families, holiday turkeys distributed to hundreds of households, and rent assistance for struggling residents reshaped how many viewed him. Later that same month, North Miami followed with its own recognition. The contrast between courtroom scrutiny and civic celebration was stark. As Melly's retrial edges closer, now projected for 2027, Kodak's support has not wavered. Tracks like Just a Matter of Slime, released in 2021, featured Kodak alongside Lil Baby, Future, and Lil Durk, signaling that Melly still commands industry respect despite years behind bars. Whether these gestures represent genuine loyalty or calculated solidarity is open to interpretation. What isn't debatable is that they reflect a deeper truth about Florida rap culture. When the system applies pressure, artists often close ranks. That brings the focus back to the center of it all. YNW Melly, Yamel Morris Demons, known professionally as YNW Melly, was born on May 1, 1999, in Gifford, Florida. He was raised by his single mother, Jamie Demons King, who was just 14 years old when she gave birth to him. Melly never knew his biological father, and the family lived in persistent poverty. Prosecutors would later argue that these early conditions shaped not only his music, but his trajectory toward violence. Supporters countered that they shaped his survival instinct and creative voice. Melly's legal troubles began early. In October 2015, at just 16 years old, he was arrested for firing shots near Vero Beach High School, an incident involving 3 students. The charges included aggravated assault, and he spent roughly a year in juvenile detention. That confinement became a turning point. It was during that period that he began taking music seriously, uploading tracks to SoundCloud that would eventually reach a global audience. His breakout moment came with Murder on My Mind, recorded in 2017 while he was still incarcerated. The song described killing a friend and being consumed by regret. It struck a nerve, climbing to number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100 and achieving multi-platinum status. The irony would later become unavoidable. Less than 2 years after its release, Melly was charged with a crime that mirrored the song's narrative almost line for line. On February 13, 2019, Melly turned himself in to Miramar police after learning that arrest warrants had been issued. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. From that day forward, he has remained in custody. By late 2025, he had spent more than 2,400 days incarcerated without a conviction. The prosecution's case continues to hinge on forensic findings that place the gunfire inside the vehicle, not outside. Alongside alleged digital evidence, they argue, points to consciousness of guilt. One of the most disputed pieces of evidence in the case comes from an Instagram direct message. According to prosecutors, Melly allegedly responded, "I did that," when asked about the murders. Another item the state has pointed to is a video recorded in November 2018, where Melly is alleged to say, "There's no regrets for thee that I did for that to die." Both of them. The defense has aggressively challenged this material. The admissibility of that video remains contested, with arguments over context, interpretation, and whether it can be reliably tied to the crime itself. Those disputes were part of what ultimately derailed the first trial. In July 2023, proceedings ended in a mistrial after the jury failed to reach a unanimous verdict. Reports indicated a 9-2-3 split, with the majority leaning toward a manslaughter conviction rather than first-degree murder. That outcome mattered. It suggested doubt over intent, even among jurors who believed Melly bore responsibility. But a mistrial meant no resolution, only delay. That delay has stretched into years. The retrial has now been pushed to January 2027 due to ongoing evidentiary battles. By the time Melly returns to court, he will have spent more than 8 years in custody without a conviction. Few defendants endure that length of pretrial detention, especially in cases that remain legally unsettled. Complicating matters further are additional charges. Prosecutors have accused Melly of witness tampering, alleging that he attempted to intimidate potential witnesses using jail phones. According to the state, these efforts involve blood-affiliated individuals acting as intermediaries. The defense has denied those claims, arguing the allegations rely heavily on inference rather than direct proof. Still, the accusations added another layer to an already complex case. In November 2024, Melly filed a lawsuit against the Broward Sheriff's Office, alleging cruel and unusual treatment. The suit described prolonged isolation, restricted visitation, and deteriorating health conditions. His attorneys argued that he was being treated more harshly than inmates already sentenced to death row. Those claims placed renewed attention on the conditions of his confinement, not just the charges he faces. If convicted, the consequences are severe. Under Florida law, Melly could receive life imprisonment or the death penalty. The stakes are heightened by the state's controversial non-unanimous jury sentencing framework, a system that has drawn criticism nationwide. Every procedural delay, every evidentiary ruling, now carries amplified weight. Despite years behind bars, Melly's cultural presence hasn't faded. Murder on My Mind has surpassed 1 billion streams, continuing to circulate far beyond the courtroom. Online, the Free Melly movement remains active, fueled by fans who believe the case represents a miscarriage of justice, and critics who see it as a warning about the consequences of blurred lines between art and reality. What makes this story endure is not just the crime itself, but everything surrounding it: loyalty and betrayal, music and evidence, youth, poverty, and the power structures that shape outcomes. The YNW case has become more than a single prosecution. It stands as a reflection of how the justice system engages with hip-hop culture, and how narratives are built long before a verdict is reached. This is where the story stands for now. And until that courtroom door opens again, the questions, the divisions, and the consequences continue to echo.